Quiet people don't lose faith loudly. They just get tired of talking to God and feeling nothing come back. If that sounds like you, stay with me. Because the moment a quiet person starts trusting God again, something inside them begins to heal, slowly, gently, but for real. There's a moment when a quiet person stops praying, not because they stopped believing, but because they got exhausted. They asked for clarity and got confusion. They asked for strength and got silence. They prayed, and life still hurt. They waited, and nothing moved. So without announcing it, they lowered their expectations. Then they lowered their words, and then they lowered their hope. On the outside, they still show up. They still smile at the right times, and they still help others. But inside, something shifts. Their prayers become shorter, then less frequent, then almost gone. Not because they don't care, but because they cared too much for too long and felt unheard. For quiet people, distance from God usually doesn't start with doubt. It starts with fatigue. They didn't walk away because they stopped believing. They walked away because they kept believing even when it hurt. Faith without any sense of connection begins to feel like talking to a wall. And that's a dangerous place, not because it makes them dramatic, but because it makes them numb. Numbness looks calm, but it's not peace. It's protection. It's the heart saying, I can't take another disappointment. So they adapt. They stop asking, hoping, and expecting. They carry everything alone. Not because they want to, but because it feels safer than being let down again. If you've ever been there, hear this. Silence doesn't always mean absence. Sometimes it means God is working deeper than your emotions can measure. But then something shifts. Not always something big, and not always a miracle. Sometimes it's subtle. A quiet thought, a line from a song, a moment of stillness in the middle of a busy day. Something softens. Not fully, just enough. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, they whisper a prayer again. Not a strong prayer, and not a perfect one. Just a small one. Are you still there? That moment is more powerful than it looks, because it isn't about certainty. It's about willingness. The willingness to open a door they once closed. The willingness to trust without proof. The willingness to try again, even with shaking hands. When a quiet person starts trusting God again, they don't suddenly become loud. They don't suddenly feel spiritual fireworks. They move slowly and carefully, because they remember what it felt like to be disappointed. So this trust is different. It isn't blind, it's intentional. They stop demanding instant answers. They stop chasing signs to calm their anxiety. They simply show up again. They pray even when it feels empty. They sit in silence without running away. They stay present even when nothing seems to happen. And something interesting begins to change. Not outside first, but inside. Their mind becomes quieter. Their reactions become softer. Their emotions become more grounded. Not because their problems disappeared, but because they're no longer carrying everything alone. This is what trust actually looks like for quiet people. It's not constant peace, it's presence. It's showing up even when you feel nothing. It's choosing not to quit even when nothing changes. It's telling the truth instead of performing strength. Sometimes it looks like sitting in a quiet room and saying, God, I don't have big faith today. I just have a small yes. And that small yes matters. Over time, their trust stops being based on outcomes. They stop overanalyzing every delay. They stop panicking when life doesn't go as planned. Because they learn something most people don't. Waiting doesn't mean rejection. Silence doesn't mean absence. And not having answers doesn't mean you're being ignored. But let's be honest. Rebuilding trust is not just spiritual. It's emotional too. Quiet people often carry old disappointments, like hidden bruises. So as God rebuilds their trust, He also teaches them how to heal, not just how to endure. Here are 3 simple practices that help a quiet person return without pretending. First, a 10-second honest prayer. 1 sentence, God, I'm here again. Or, God, I'm tired. Or, God, help me trust you. Then pause, and let the pause be part of the prayer. Second, name what you're carrying. Write 3 lines. What happened? What you felt? What you need? You don't have to share it with everyone, but don't hide it from yourself. Unnamed pain grows heavier. Named pain becomes something you can bring to God with clarity. Third, take 1 small step of obedience. Not to earn love, but to rebuild alignment. Send the apology you've been avoiding, or rest when you keep forcing. Say no to what's draining you, and say yes to what's honest. Quiet trust grows through small choices, repeated, And while you do this, remember, trust doesn't mean letting people hurt you. Some quiet people confuse faith with staying in harm. Jesus was gentle, but he wasn't passive. He loved deeply, but he didn't live for human approval. He withdrew when he needed rest and spoke truth when it was necessary. If your quietness is being exploited, God may be calling you to set boundaries, not to stay silent. As a quiet person heals, you may notice new changes. You stop over-explaining yourself, stop begging for validation, and stop proving your worth to everyone. You become steadier, not louder, but more stable. You begin to let things unfold instead of trying to control everything. That kind of strength is quiet, but powerful. It's the strength of a heart that has been disappointed and still chooses to come back. There's something most people don't understand about quiet people who are learning to trust again. It's not that they don't want to believe. It's that they remember too clearly what it felt like when they did. They remember the prayers that felt sincere but unanswered. They remember the nights they stayed hopeful longer than they should have. They remember how it felt to open their heart only to feel like nothing reached back. And that memory doesn't disappear just because they decide to try again. It stays. It whispers things like, what if this is another disappointment? What if nothing changes again? What if you're just setting yourself up to feel that silence one more time? That's why quiet trust is slow. Not because it's weak, but because it's careful. Quiet people don't rebuild faith the way others do. They don't jump back in with excitement. They test it. Gently, they observe their own heart as much as they observe God. They notice how they react to silence now. They notice whether they can stay present without shutting down. They notice whether they can feel something again without running from it. And that process takes time, sometimes longer than they expected. Because for them, trusting again is not just a spiritual decision. It's an emotional risk. It's choosing to stay open in a place where they once felt closed. It's choosing to stay soft in a place where they once became numb. It's choosing to believe while still remembering the pain of when belief felt unanswered. And that tension can feel uncomfortable, but it's also where something real begins to form. Because this time, their faith is not built on expectation. It's built on honesty, not on constant reassurance, but on quiet persistence. And that kind of trust, the one that grows slowly, carefully, and without pressure, is the kind that doesn't collapse the next time life gets hard. So if you've stopped talking to God even just a little, you're not broken, you're tired. And you don't have to return loudly, you don't need perfect words, and you don't need to feel brave. You just need one moment of honesty, one small step, one quiet prayer, one whispered, I'm still here. Because the moment you start trusting again, even a little, you won't become a different person. You'll become a stronger version of who you already are. That is faith, quietly,